Okay, hey everyone, welcome to an episode of On the Rest from Off the Cuff. To have a fun update for you guys from the brand Erebus. They were founded and are driven by Jody Musgrove of YouTube's Just One More Watch and his business partner and avid watch collector Stephen Parker. They aim to offer the best made watches with the best specifications at the best prices, and all with a personal service and attention to client that you really just don't get from big brands. So very admirable, and I think people have been quite pleased with their previous releases. This one falls into a fun kind of space. It is an everyday watch, kind of field watch, but it's also kind of a wild card watch thanks to this very unique complication. Now, in terms of something that you could wear every day, some key characteristics and design language within that genre, of course, you're going to want to find something that is quite just a versatile blend of both sporty and dressy attributes, and I think this does a good job with that. This is their 24, and the particular colorway is Erebus white because it has the Erebus logo there on the dial in white font. Now, in their own words, the Erebus 24 introduces something rarely seen in modern watchmaking, a true 24-hour time display housed within a clean, highly legible field watch design. These are going to eventually go for $599 when they get to their full price, but are currently on sale for $499. This is just a press loaner, so I mean, just because I'm on YouTube and I love, Jody and his channel doesn't mean that, I'm getting any type of special compensation or anything like that. This is just a fun watch that I'm looking forward to, sharing with you all. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, now as you guys can see, quite handsome. Definitely a unique take there. This is one of the more unique dials with that branding, which does add almost like a sector-like functionality, as well as, of course, the branding of the E in Erebus. Now, in terms of the dimensions, I think really nice sweet spot here, 38 millimeters in diameter, about 11.9 millimeters thick, and that is including the crystal, but I will say it's not really in the crystal height that gets this one going. Let me actually give the case a quick little extra wipe down here, a little dust off as well. Let's enjoy, if we get, there we go. Check that out. I would say it's more so the tall bezel that really gives this one a bit of a thick boy type of vibe here. But I will say, on wrist, you don't notice it, but I will say if you're examining it, then it's something that might stand out in terms of it feeling a bit, I'd say, I wouldn't say top heavy, but just to where it has a bit of a top hat to it because of how you still get a nice thin mid case, but then you have an extremely thin case back, and then that's offset by a much thicker bezel, as you guys can see, quite deep, but I think in this black colorway it helps in terms of everything kind of balancing out in terms of the proportions. Now, the lug to lug is just 44.8, so under 45 millimeters. That's going to make that very, very wearable. It's all brushed 316L stainless steel. Again, it does have that flat sapphire with an inner anti-reflective coating. Inside, although you can't see it, you have a customized automatic Miota 9000 series movement where you're going to have 42 hours of power reserve and 4 hertz in terms of that beat rate, or 28,800 vibrations per hour. Unfortunately, can't see it because it is a solid case back, but again, in terms of keeping it on the thinner side, the case back does help with that. Now, the dial is matte black, as you guys can see. I almost would want to call it a sandwich dial, but which I guess it kind of is. But let's see what this is all about. So we should probably wait until we get closer to 0 in terms of getting a good hack, but technically, I should be able to do it at the 30 at the bottom of the hour, and then I can just set the hands in between. So as we go, essentially it's 11, right? Now it's 12. Then as we cross over to 1300 for 1 p.m., now it's showing as 13. Then 14, so it's 2 p.m., right? 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m. is 1800, so on and so forth. And then the nice thing is once you get back over all the way through, it's 11 at night, we're getting close to midnight, 24 hours have passed, then boom, you're going to go ahead and go over now back to 1 after. So I just think that that's really fun. And again, I will see it again. It's very balanced, right? These little windows, it does help with a certain level of symmetry on the dial. And we'll see that change over again. It is very satisfying. So I think that's a cool little parlor trick. And again, it's something just different. And then since I'm hacked at 30 seconds, I'm going to want to, of course, set this in between minutes, essentially, right in between, because it'd be 30 seconds in. Bam. All right. So we'll keep it going from here. So that's what you got. And then you do have BGW9 Loom here. And then it does have 50 meters of water resistance or 5 atmospheres, screw down crown. So at least it's confidence inspiring from that. Of course, with the complication and how open things are on the inside, that means they would have had to add to the thickness to really seal everything up and get extra gaskets in there. So I'm sure that's the reason why this is only 50 atmospheres, which is better than 30. I should say 50, but 5 atmospheres, which is better. 50 meters is better than 30 meters, which is kind of the minimum. Anything below that is basically 0, or splash resistant, right? Which typically equals to about 30. So this is going to have minimal, safety in terms of from water, but I do like the fact that they did include that screw down crown, which does help because now at least you're going to know that your crown is pushed in, gaskets are engaged, and that if you do get this wet, you'll be good to go. Now, in terms of the lugs here, 20 millimeter lug width, you have this 20 millimeter color matched leather strap with a 2 millimeter taper down to about 18 millimeters at this nicely signed mill clasp. You have a fixed keeper, you have a floating keeper, you do have some nice vintage inspired stitching here. That is quite handsome, and I will say this leather strap, although I don't know much about it because there's not a lot that's printed, this is pre-production, I don't know if that's something that's going to be updated later on. I will say it is nice and supple from that point of view. So it doesn't require any type of break-in, doesn't have any padding or taper to it thickness-wise. The taper is just going to be width-wise there. But with that said, let's actually get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, as you guys can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, I do like a 38 millimeter watch, especially one that doesn't have a turning bezel. I think it fits very nicely on the wrist. It is a bit more of an open dial, so it's going to give you a lot more wrist presence than your typical 38 millimeter that would have a smaller dial and a thicker bezel. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, you're going to notice quite a bit of perspective distortion. It's going to make the head of the watch seem a lot larger and the sides of my wrist and thus the sides of the strap just kind of fall away. So I'll keep my wrist nice and low and then just tighten up the frame here so that you guys can get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a true aspect ratio as how this may lay on your own wrist. And now you can see here, definitely better suited visually, although nothing changed but the camera lens. So keep that in mind when you're perusing Instagram and you're scrolling, and it seems like all of the vintage watches look so great, and it's because smaller watches, when you have that distortion, they're all going to appear larger, and but within the actual aspect of a human and not a floating wrist, looking with your eyes and not looking with a lens, especially a wide angle lens you're typically going to find on your phone. That is something to definitely keep in mind. So I do think it looks good. As you guys can see, it does actually sit nicely on the wrist, nice and low, has a nice kind of curve down in terms of those lugs that aren't overly long. Drilled lugs, very nice to have. And again, you do have a bit of an extra bezel there, but it makes sense with the hand stack and everything. So if they can make this a little bit thinner, that'd be cool, but at the same time, I think because this is really, within their words, a field watch kind of silhouette, I think this is fine for it to look more robust and sporty overall. And yeah, think it looks good, especially considering this is just a very simple monochromatic black and white layout. The fact that it is still quite visually interesting without, being over the top, I can appreciate that. So with that said, we'll get it off the wrist, set up for some Loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. All right, so pretty minimal in terms of the Loom. We'll give it a little blast here, and you guys can see there's actually little Loom pips on the outer reaches, but at the angle it's in, you're probably not going to see them all because of that slightly taller bezel, but they are there. And again, this is pre-production, so I would expect this is probably going to be the worst version of this Loom, and the production models will be improved. And even if they're not, this again is more in the field watch style. And if anything, there's probably an argument for field watches to have less Loom because you don't want to give away your position in dark hours. But I will say you can see that the handset is really glowing there. So it's not a question of the application in my eyes, and it's more, deliberate choices in terms of the style and aesthetic trade-off. It would be really cool if the numerals were loomed. I don't know if that's something because of the weight of the disc that they, or the thickness and clearance in terms of adding Loom there. Maybe it would have been so thin it doesn't even show up and fades really quick. So I'm sure there's tons of different considerations that went into that. But one thing I like to work in is a bit of a low light transition because you're always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming out of buildings, walking underneath the overhangs. You're just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes run like in less than optimal lighting. And you guys can see very high contrast in this monochromatic colorway. You can see the numerals standing out. You can see the Erebus logo play there standing out. And even again, with less light, it's going to catch the white, and you're going to be able to still be able to tell what time it is, and that's good. And this isn't, meant to be some particular, this isn't a chronograph where timing is going to be, dire and calculations are based off of time. Same goes for a dive watch, right? Like, we're not timing oxygen or anything like that. This is literally just more so to be a fun everyday piece that is quite versatile, while I think again injecting a bit of that fun there as with this really neat, and I guess you could even call it rare in terms of the fact of the complication that they used. It's not completely unheard of, but it's definitely, again, it's underutilized to say the least. So we'll go ahead and get the lights back on here. And guys, in terms of closing thoughts on the wrist, nice proportions, maybe a touch top heavy visually, not physically, but I think visually, if I was creating this watch, it's a feature I wouldn't ask for. I would probably prefer it to be a bit more balanced visually by thinning down that bezel. It's thin enough, I think, width-wise, but I think height-wise, it's just a touch tall. Now, I think something that could help that would maybe be doing like a stepped lip, which might help break the lines up and kind of present it slightly more balanced aesthetically without actually having to change anything. So team at Erebus, if you're listening, have you guys considered a stepped lip? I think that could work. Now, in terms of model variants, there's 10 different dials each. So there's those different options that can be configured in a 38 or 40 millimeter watch. So total of 20 different combinations. Do check the site links for current options and availability. In terms of comparable models, guys, there are really few competitors using this niche complication, and Erebus have managed to kind of create a kind of Wildcard watch that can actually be worn daily. So I like that they're kind of balancing this more whimsical complication with more sedate and versatile daily kind of stylings. So for me, guys, bottom line, while Jody and Steve have previously focused on releases that target more mainstream silhouettes that embrace maximum daily versatility, balancing both dressy and sporty, the 24 pivots away from that that safe formula to inject a healthy serving of fun with its playful yet useful 24-hour complication. And that's why I think it's a lot of fun for me. This is not meant to be a one watch collection type of watch. This is definitely a fun third, fourth, fifth, sixth type of watch that you can really enjoy, I think, just because it is geared towards somebody that does collect watches, that is looking for something different, that does appreciate those little nuances and niche complications. So with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please like, and if you're ready, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.